Fluffy, creamy, and all-around dreamy, the perfect scrambled eggs are easier to achieve than you might think. But you better think twice before you grab that metal spatula. Not all eggs are created equal. Anyone who has seen the deep orange yolk and the variation in shell color and size of a farm egg already knows that. But not all of us have access to fresh eggs straight from a chicken every day. Luckily, store-bought eggs are perfectly fine as long as you make sure they're as fresh as possible. As eggs age, the texture of both the white and the yolk change, becoming looser and runnier. To test the age, fill a cup with water. A fresh egg will sink to the bottom and lay flat, while a middling egg will stand on the bottom, point up, and an old egg will float. This is because as eggs age, moisture inside the shell evaporates and is replaced by air. For scrambled eggs, you want eggs that lay flat on the bottom. Old eggs that aren't yet rotten can still be useful. Somewhat aged egg whites are great for whipping, while hard-boiled old eggs can peel more easily. Just don't use them for your scrambled eggs. While it may seem counterintuitive, cracking eggs on a flat surface is better than using the edge of a bowl. The big problem with the bowl technique is the higher risk of food contamination, as raw egg is likely to run down the side and possibly introduce bacteria to the rest of your kitchen. The other potential issue is little shell pieces getting into the bowl. But when you crack an egg on a flat surface, the membrane inside the shell typically remains intact. This means no egg on your counter and less of a chance for a bunch of little shell pieces flying into the scrambled egg mixture. But if you do find a piece of eggshell in the bowl, use the now empty half of the shell for easy removal.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
If you find that everything's sticking to the pan every time you make scrambled eggs, then there's a good chance you're not properly heating it up first. It doesn't matter whether you're using a non-stick, cast iron, or stainless steel pan. If you don't preheat, your eggs are more likely to stick, no matter the material. Just bring the pan to the temperature you want it to be while cooking. For most materials, you'll know it's ready when a droplet of water will evaporate quickly on the surface. Of course, different pans take different times to properly preheat. Non-stick pans and stainless steel can preheat in just a few minutes, whereas cast iron can take upwards of 10 minutes to come to the ideal scrambled egg cooking temperature. When in doubt, just use the water evaporation test. Have you ever wondered why eggs turn out dry and rubbery and fail to have the silky smooth consistency that you want from a good dish of scrambled eggs? Cooking at too high a heat level could very well be why. Eggs are made up of two basic things, water and protein. As they cook, the protein inside begins to change shape and stick together. This turns the eggs from a raw liquid into a solid structure, but it can also be too much of a good thing, as overcooked eggs will dry out and take on a gummy texture. Low and slow is the best strategy for cooking eggs. Sure, it may take longer, but it's the best way to make perfect scrambled eggs. And besides, it's just a difference of a few minutes, not hours. Using some kind of oil or butter is crucial for successful scrambled eggs. Not only does the addition of fat help prevent eggs from sticking to the pan, it also keeps them from drying out completely while they cook. You might reach for non-stick spray, but a light coating of that may not be enough to reap all the benefits of using fat. Suggestions vary on how much oil or butter should go into the pan, from 1 teaspoon to 2 tablespoons per egg, depending on the pan type and size. Even if you stick to the low end, a serving size of the cooking spray typically equals just 1/20th of a teaspoon of oil. This is 20 times less than the minimum recommendation. Now, we're not saying that you should never use spray oil. Just be aware of how you apply that oil to the pan, especially when it comes to quantity. Additionally, consider what fat you use based on your flavor preference. Butter, olive oil, and vegetable oil are all acceptable, and each brings a unique profile that will affect your scrambled eggs in their own ways.
They're like butter.
Butter, like butter.
If you like cheesy scrambled eggs, we bet you often simply reach for a bag of the pre-shredded variety. While this is certainly easy, it doesn't typically make for the ideal scrambled egg texture. Scrambled eggs are prone to several issues, including drying out. Meanwhile, shredded cheese is typically coated in anti-caking agents. The problem is that these agents typically use some kind of starch or cellulose that pulls moisture out of the cheese to keep the shreds from sticking. This interferes with the ability of the cheese to melt, making it difficult to incorporate it into the scrambled eggs. So, do the right thing and take an extra minute or two to shred your own cheese. Cleaning dishes isn't exactly the most beloved chore for most people, but committing to a bit of washing up is worth it to make sure that you have the right pan for your scrambled eggs. If you use a pan that's too small, you run the risk of sloshing partially cooked eggs over the side. Plus, they're also more likely to stick to the pan, leading to more intense cleanup. On the other end of the scale, a pan that's too large can cause the eggs to spread out and quickly overcook. To do it right, use a 5-inch pan for 1 egg, an 8-inch one for 2 to 3 eggs, and a 10-inch pan for more than 3 eggs. One of the biggest hints to making perfect scrambled eggs is right there in the name. You might think that you should use a whisk, immersion blender, or any number of other kitchen implements to create a perfectly smooth scrambled egg base. But this extra step is entirely unnecessary and unhelpful. That's because many of these mixing methods add air to the beaten eggs, which can result in a dry dish. The good news is that the best way to mix your eggs requires no more than a fork. Simply beat the eggs with the fork using a side-to-side motion. And remember that there's no need for a perfectly homogeneous mixture at this point, as you'll continue to mix the eggs in the pan. Another possible option is to use chopsticks. This will also perfectly beat the eggs, creating the ideal texture for scrambling without incorporating too much air. The end result is a luscious breakfast experience.
What if we always said is the most important thing?
Breakfast.
Eggs on their own have fat in the yolk, but scrambled eggs benefit from an added creamy element to help them stay moist and supple as they cook instead of turning into a hard mess. Adding fat to eggs prevents the protein from bonding and results in a more desirable, tender texture. There are a couple of ways to add an extra creamy ingredient. Instead of just buttering the pan, add butter directly to the egg mixture before cooking. It doesn't need to be melted, as it can simply be cut into small pieces. It will melt as it cooks, tenderizing the texture and keeping everything tasty. Another creamy option is creme fraiche, whose mildly tangy flavor and high fat content make it an excellent addition. Other possibilities include heavy cream or half and half. If you're avoiding dairy, you can add additional egg yolks into the mix. You only need 1 yolk for every 3 to 4 eggs for a more custard-like scrambled egg. When cooking scrambled eggs, you should aim to keep them almost constantly moving. The goal is to keep them out of direct contact with the pan for as long as possible. Even if they're being cooked on low heat, allowing a portion of the scrambled eggs to sit in contact with hot metal for too long can cause the proteins to become unpleasantly rubbery. One of the most important goals to keep in mind when making scrambled eggs is to simply continue cooking to the desired doneness. But as you do so, just remember to use your cooking utensils to keep the eggs moving and to preserve the scramble's moisture. You want something that's thicker than raw yolk, but obviously not so thick that you can't even bite into it. If you use something like creme fraiche in your eggs, then congratulations! You've already added both liquid and fat. But if you're looking for something more subtle to round it all out, consider adding some extra liquid to the mixture. Many people like to add water or milk to their scrambled eggs. The former tends to yield a fluffy and deeply egg-flavored dish, while the latter is likely to mellow the flavor and add a creamy note. The addition of liquid also helps to steam the eggs, which makes them extra fluffy. And it should also be noted that none other than Dolly Parton has admitted that she prefers to use ice water when cooking scrambled eggs, and who are we to argue with Dolly?
You know what else she does? She cooks them for about 9 to 5 minutes.
When it comes to scrambled eggs, a metal spatula is not your friend. While it can be a handy tool in other situations, the results tend to be subpar in this case. A metal tool can scratch nonstick pans and may even leave little pieces of the coating in the food. This isn't as much of a problem on stainless steel and cast iron pans, though those materials can get scratched as well. Also, a metal spatula simply isn't really suited to the task of scrambling eggs. It's better for flipping, not scrambling. The ideal tool instead is a silicone spatula. This allows you to gently and easily move the eggs around the pan with plenty of control. The fact that it doesn't have a hard surface shouldn't matter, because the scrambled eggs shouldn't stick to the bottom of the pan if you followed all of our other tips. Silicone spatulas also ideally have a flat surface to easily remove the eggs from the pan. It can be tempting to mix your seasonings with the raw eggs just before or while you scramble them. This may seem like a time saver, but it's not the best idea. For one thing, adding salt too soon will inhibit protein formation and can result in goopy eggs. So instead, wait until the eggs have mostly cooked, Then add enough salt for the desired flavor bump. Similarly, add fresh herbs after the eggs have already begun to cook so as to preserve their flavor and texture. Also, since scrambled eggs don't take very long to cook, make sure you have your seasonings on hand before you start cooking. Once your perfectly cooked scrambled eggs are ready to eat, don't allow them to sit in the hot pan a moment longer. Have you ever wondered why the scrambled eggs at breakfast buffets feel like rubber? That's because chafing pans continue to cook the eggs to the point of being overdone. The difference between done and overcooked eggs can be a matter of mere seconds. Additionally, the longer the eggs sit in the pan, the more likely a skin will form, turning them into something more like an omelet. To avoid this, remove the eggs from the pan a little early. Try taking them out while they're still slightly undercooked, though definitely not raw. Because they're still hot, the eggs will continue to firm up on your plate right before you start chowing down.